Hi, I'm Jill Moray and welcome to another video from the knittingchannel.com. Today we're going to talk about to block or not to block. Now, it scares a lot of people to do a project where you have to block. And I'm telling you that it is not hard, A. B, most projects you don't have to block. When do you have to block? Well, let's look at this scarf. Most scarves you don't. But let's take a look at this intricate scarf that I'm making for my husband that I may finish in this millennium. Let's see. If you notice, it's a little misshapen here. It sort of rolls around over there. So what I am going to do with this is I will block. How do I block something like this? You wet it, you put it on something. There's something called a block and roll you can use, or you put towels down with newspaper underneath and just pin it down into shape. And when it dries, it will be perfectly square. Here's another time you have to block. I just made this beautiful dress for a friend of mine who is due any minute. Antonia is due any minute with a little girl. This is one of my favorite baby patterns. And by the way, if you like this, I can carry this in a kit. If enough of you like it, I love it. I have this beautiful Egyptian cotton and this lovely, lovely pattern. So if you see the bottom, it's curling up and the bottom is absolutely beautiful. This is how it should look. The bottom, the PK at the bottom is perfectly flat. Everything else looks absolutely beautiful. And what I would do with this is you wet it, use a spray bottle so it doesn't get too wet, and you could always make it wetter if you need that. And then you just pin these points down on a towel or a blocking mat. You pin the points down so they're flat, and when it dries, it's perfect. Okay, so now you know if you have to block or not. When you're doing a sweater, you don't always have to block. If your pieces come out at the exact measurements they're supposed to, just sew the whole thing together. Try it on. If there are bottoms that need to be flat, chances are they're going to look fine. So I don't want you to think that you're not going to go on to other types of projects because you're afraid of blocking. Don't be afraid of blocking because, as I said, most things do not need to be blocked. Hats, forget it. Hats you don't have to block. Now, here's something else that I want to talk about. And that is when you're getting ready to finish something, you have all these strings hanging down, and sometimes things don't look perfect. Like if you can see here, this is the back actually, and this is the front. Now, if you notice the neckline, it's just perfect, right? Well, it wasn't perfect. It looked like this with this gap. So all you do is you take your needle and this string that's hanging, the yarn, bring it toward this area, and you just close the hole. That's it. Just close that hole and it would look perfect. Here's another thing I want to suggest, especially when it comes to baby or children's things. Now, this pattern called for 2 buttons on each side, and that you knit buttonholes, and then you put these buttons over here. Isn't this beautiful? As I said, it's my favorite pattern. Now, when you have a baby, you don't want to deal with the buttonholes and what if the buttons come out. This is what I do. What I will do here is, okay, I still do the back, which is a little higher, and the front, which is a little lower, so that when I fold over the front over the back, where there would be buttons, I take pretty buttons. I usually use these great glass buttons. Can you see this? And I will just sew the 2 buttons down. So it looks like there are buttonholes here, and it looks like these buttons go through the buttonhole, but you're gonna put this over the baby's head anyway. So you don't want this poor mother to have to deal with everything else she's dealing with, to deal with buttons. By the way, my wonderful friends gave me lovely things when my son was born. But may I suggest you don't buy anybody things that have to be ironed. Okay, I mean, it's one thing when you have a hand knitted thing, but I had some denim jumpsuit, which I loved, but once it was washed, it had to be intricately ironed. Guess what? He didn't wear a second time. So with knitting and with babies, here is the other thing you may want to do. I do this now and then. Sometimes I do the front and the back absolutely identically, and then I just join this as if it's a regular shoulder seam. Then if a stain gets on the front becomes the back. The other thing that I suggest and what I do, and I know people love it, is when I wrap up the gift, put it in pretty tissue, white tissue, don't use colored tissue. You don't want your yarn, because if that gets wet and the dye goes on, no. Put it in the box. I also put a note to the baby about washing instructions. And then I also add more buttons if there are buttons on here, even if it's decorative. You never know when a button comes off, and you don't want someone not to wear what you made because a button is loose. Also, if it's a neighbor, a very close neighbor, I offer to do the washing of the baby things, especially, for the first year, because they're very busy. And this way, it'll be washed and rolled in a towel and set out to dry, and all those other things we're going to discuss in an upcoming video that discusses all about finishing, everything you need to know about finishing. So what's the point here? You can make everything look perfect. Not everything needs to be blocked. Use your discretion. Don't not make something because you're afraid of the finishing and the blocking. I'm always here to help you. So keep knitting with an open heart, keep knitting beautiful presents for people, and keep visiting the Knitting Channel. I'll see you soon. Hi, it's Jill Moray from the Knitting Channel. If you liked that video, why don't you check out the rest of these videos? And while you're at it, click below and join the knittingchannel.com. And as always, keep knitting with an open heart.